Hey, so welcome everybody to day 2. Hope you enjoyed yesterday's sessions, the keynote panel session, and the sponsor sessions that you might have attended yesterday. Thanks for joining us for the 2000 COVID edition of CAN-CWiC conference. Goal of the conference is to build community among tech women in Canada, and we do our best to do that. We sincerely hope that we're back in person next year, because we're missing some of the key elements of this conference, which is the conversation, the food, making new friends, hugging old friends, and just kind of being together and doing that in-person networking. So hopefully next year we're back in person and you'll join us then. Just before we start, we'd like everybody to keep themselves on mute for the talk. If you have questions, we're going to have lots of time for questions at the end of the session. So if you can put your questions in the Q&A forum, we'll be happy to answer them at the end. Okay, so it's my pleasure to introduce the keynote speaker for today, Nevine Abid. Nevine is a computer engineer who obtained her PhD from the University of Waterloo in electrical and computer engineering, where her research was focused on secure implementation of cryptographic algorithms. Nevine has held positions at BlackBerry and Certicom following a career in IoT and automotive security at TrustPoint Innovation and through its acquisition by ETAS. Nevine is now an applied scientist in the crypto algorithms team at Amazon Web Services. Throughout her career, Nevine has authored and contributed to patents and enjoys developing low-level algorithms that are both efficient and resistant to side-channel attacks. We're looking forward to your talk, Nevine, and I'll turn it over to you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Andy. I'm gonna share my screen. Is it?
I think I stopped sharing.
Yeah. Can you see it now?
Yep.
Okay, that's good. Thank you for the introduction and thank you for the invitation. I'm really happy to be with you here. I hope this journey would not be too long and you have time for Q&A at the end. But I'll start a bit from the beginning, but I'll tell you first what I'm going to be talking about. So those main 3 points, different but similar. I'll tell you what is that, a big gap to be filled, and lessons learned. And as you know, my talk is going to be focused on the field of cybersecurity. So where has my journey taken me? As Wendy told you, I had a degree, I have a PhD in electrical and computer engineering from University of Waterloo, but actually before that, I grew up in Egypt. Those are pictures of my family when we went back for a visit about 11 years ago. And I moved to Canada. I settled in Kitchener-Waterloo area, and I've been like my kids are born here. And like from this sunny place to this also sometimes sunny place, but I like the snow. I like the icicles on the tree. That's why I took these pictures. I look sometimes at my journey as like I came chasing some bits. What does that mean? So when I first had my daughter and I started talking to supervisors, professors in University of Waterloo about what I could be doing for my grad studies, Professor Anwar Hassan has told me about his research and also his sabbatical leave that was right before then, where he was working in cryptographic algorithms in small devices and how to make them fast. And I didn't have any idea about crypto. It wasn't even part of my syllabus in undergrad. And but the idea of like having small devices and you have to hide the information in there and some bits running and you don't want anyone to be able to read them, that was interesting to me. So I remember that most of what was my mind back then was that I needed a good night's sleep because my daughter was still a baby, but yet I found it fascinating and I started. Actually, I was starting as a master's, like to have a master's degree to be able to work in industry. I should tell you that my dad and my 2 older siblings, my brother and sister, they're all engineers. They all had PhDs. And I'm not going there. I just gonna work in industry. And my sister was supportive of that. She said, yeah, you just take a master. And then what happened is that as I'm doing the master's, I applied a paper to a conference, and then my supervisor said, if that paper gets accepted, it could be a chapter in the PhD thesis, and you can switch to PhD. And the idea then seemed like really quite reasonable, and so I continued and pursued the degree. Not that it seemed that I've always seen the end. It seemed sometimes endless, but it did have an end. And also it wasn't that easy. So I remember that I went back at some point when I prepared some talk to the IT group in 2015 and looked at my notes from early 2000s, because I remember clearly that the first course I took, it wasn't easy. Like I couldn't understand what we're talking about. I always thought I liked math and I understood it well, but this was a different type of math. And it was like, I didn't know why it's not going in easily. And because like, yeah, there are cryptography in particular has the algorithms and the methods used there. The math is supposed to be relying on hard problems, not hard to understand, but hard to compute. You can compute them one way and then they are hard to compute the other way back. And so that means that there would be computationally infeasible for computers that with the current power to be able to reverse the operations and get back the secret information that was computed the way forward. And now also on top of that emerged the field of quantum cryptography, which is based on quantum physics and how you can represent the informations differently rather than the binary information currently represented in our classical computers. But you could represent them in more than 2 states, and then this would break the current hard problems that we know, but then emerges a new field. So that field is endless, but I learned then during my study that field is actually multidisciplinary. And I'm a computer engineer, and I don't know like how to play it well with like all the background that's needed. But I learned through experience and through the interacting with my supervisor that it's there are multiple disciplines, and you need to know from each one what to take in order to do like the job or the research that you're focused on. So I learned enough math to be able to know what is needed when I write algorithms, what is needed when I write programs. And I was mostly focused on how to make them secure. I'll come to that in the next slide. But I wanted to show you here that, yeah, as I'm starting, I realized that those are the disciplines that are tightly knit in crypto. But then when you look at the security field, it becomes even bigger. There are like system administrators, ethical hackers, legislators and privacy experts, and even more, as I'm saying, like now quantum physicists. And it's just the field itself has many disciplines that interact in it. So I will just give you, so that I don't leave you with some information about the field. The information security has many objectives, and this is a subset of them, and you may come across them multiple times. So the first one is confidentiality, which means that the data is not supposed to be readable by unauthorized entities. And this is usually achieved by encryption. So when the data is encrypted, it's confidential, cannot be read except by the people who have the keys to read it. Authenticity, that means you can attest to where the data has come from, the entity that has produced it, and that entity should be vetted and corroborated. That this together with integrity, integrity means that you can attest also that the data has not been changed, whether in transit or whether when it's stored. Those are usually achieved by digital signatures and message authentication codes. I'm not counting on you retaining this information, but I'm just giving you a taste of what like the field, that's like just the basis of the field of the information security. More recently, also availability is an issue is an important objective, because a lot of our data now is not stored in our disks. It is stored like somewhere remotely, and so when you need it, it needs to be available. Yeah, for more objectives, you can check the Handbook of Applied Cryptography that was done by authors from University of Waterloo as well, but it has a lot of information, but you would find a good introduction there. It's available online. So I came to understand too that there are different building blocks, but I'm simplifying it here just so that I give you an idea. So I talked about the hard math problems on which the field is built. And then there are the algorithms where you take those math problems and you turn them into code that the computer understands and can communicate, like can handle, so that it knows what to compute exactly and what's the output. And then there are protocols built on top of that. So I'll give you an example. So for example, whenever you go to your bank website, you're using a TLS protocol, and that means that your computer is negotiating keys with the bank website, and then it's going to encrypt the information, and it needs to be able to prove that the website is legitimate, and all those things are built up in protocols. There are other protocols for storing data, and there are so many, but they are built on top of those algorithms that know how to compute with the data. Then comes the explosion in the number of applications. And if you look around you, like now, any application, any app you download on your mobile, any app you use on your computer or in the cloud, they would be built in some point of it and based on security if it's handling any information or any personal data. If it's not, even sometimes if it's a game, like if it's a game that doesn't store your information, maybe it would not have security, but if it has to store your account or any information about you, it has to have some components of these. So I mentioned earlier that what my supervisor was working on and what I was doing my research on was in the field of side channel analysis and attacks. I'm actually was working more in the securing part. So what does that mean is that in the last about two decades, it was obvious that the hardness of mathematical problems itself, even for classical computer, I'm not talking about quantum computers, is not enough, because the algorithms end up being implemented in circuits and in code, and those circuits and code, they handle the secret information, or at least part of it is secret. And then if you try, like, immerse the field of, if you try to connect the power lines of those devices, or connect an electromagnetic probe to them and see whatever power consumption or electromagnetic emanations coming from them, and graph them on an oscilloscope and process them with data analysis techniques, signal analysis techniques with your PC, you can actually detect either a certain pattern for the computation or more involved a correlation between the computation and the secrets. And so then they became here like where the engineering and hacking field shines, where I don't know if you've heard about, like in recent 2 years, there was the Meltdown and Speckle attacks. Those were actually some type of timing attacks where you could be monitoring how much time it would take to do a computation, and based on the outcomes, based on the time it takes, you know that the outcomes that have been taken during it. I guess because many of you are from computer science fields, so like if you have if and then blocks in your code, and then they do different things based on whether the secret data is zeros or ones or something, then you would know based on the different branches taken what was the secret data on which it hinged. So that's where my research was focused. I was actually also what happened is that I was considering saying, like, okay, I wanted to go to test what industry is like. My sister was then working in academia. She was a professor, and I wanted to know what industry is like. And so I got advice from friends and also from my husband saying, maybe it's easier now that you're doing your research to get a co-op job, because when I have a degree, PhD degree, and then also don't have any Canadian experience, it would be hard to penetrate the industry. So actually, this was a very good advice. So BlackBerry, which was called RIM then, was the industry partner for my supervisor's research. And the head of the security department, which was like at that time, RIM was, I think, about 2,000 employees, or maybe somewhere between 2,000, less than 4,000, attended like our research presentations. And I approached him. That was also like advice given from my husband. He said, why don't you approach him and see if he has a co-op job? And I did, and I got my very first interview, and I got the job as a co-op. And so I worked, I was very, very happy with this step. So I worked with the security team, and I focused on my research to see what could I provide, what could I offer them in terms of surveying the literature and finding algorithms that could be implemented on such a restrained device to be able to protect against side channel attacks. So then BlackBerry got acquired. I then was also, after I finished my PhD while still working at BlackBerry, I got hired by CERICOM, which was in close connection with BlackBerry. I was actually recommended to CERICOM, and CERICOM was a spin-off from University of Waterloo by co-founded by Dr. Scott Vanstone, who was a professor in mathematics, who was one of the first people to commercialize some of the techniques of crypto. And they were the providers of the security libraries for the BlackBerry. So I worked there, and also my first projects were focused very closely to my research, but they also broadened the application of my research into other things that I didn't do in my thesis, but they were still kind of applicable research that we needed to find solutions to current problems, and also publish them and patent them, and it was really fun work. And then CERICOM got acquired by BlackBerry, and then later on I joined a company founded also by Dr. Scott Vanstone, which was called TrustPoint Innovation. And there I was exposed to the world of Internet of Things, so or called IoT, and maybe some of you have heard this word. So the Internet of Things is because now computation and like the processors can compute much more than before. So even BlackBerry has evolved to be a powerful device, and then it became cheaper and easier to make other devices that we've seen on the market, like the Android devices, and then also there was the iPhone, but those still were very powerful devices. Then we've seen like cameras and baby monitors and sensors and all of those which came out that were able to both compute and connect. So connecting them to the internet was something like looked very, very fascinating, because then you can get whatever information from them and process them on more powerful computers in the cloud. I'm here simplifying the diagram, but just so you have an idea like what I'm talking to. But then when this field started coming up and everyone is connecting a device to internet and is happy with it, then came the attacks also, that come along, which maybe you've heard about the attack which came through survey cameras and that brought down the internet. I'm trying to remember how many hundreds of thousands of devices that caused this attack, which is called distributed denial of service attack, or DDoS, or sometimes it's referred to as DOS attacks, where you just like use those devices to keep sending requests until your server cannot take it anymore and just comes down. There are other types of attacks, of course, but that prompted that like this field is not safe without security. Like those devices need to have attestation also, which is usually done via certificates, digital certificates. The connections need to be encrypted, or they have to be able to connect via TLS, which is the same technology we use between our computers and the cloud. And so the security in the field of IoT started emerging right away. And in TrustPoint, I worked also closely on another part of that field, which actually started coming out even before IoT took off so much, which was vehicle-to-vehicle communication and vehicle-to-everything communication. The purpose of it was mostly first to prevent collisions, so that the cars could see other cars around the corner, or get information from bikers or pedestrians. They carry certain devices, and from signals on the road and from the traffic lights, and like so. And so it became not only about preventing collision, but about all the things you could do in this application when you can make vehicles communicate with all the things around them. And as I said, I'm simplifying this diagram, but a lot happens in the cloud. I'll show you something subsequently, but like the cloud usually does a lot of things like filtering the data, storing databases, analytics, and dashboards, and all those things that come along. Also, the field of vehicle-to-vehicle communication brought in more innovation in the field of security, because now it was the way to issue the certificates to the car while keeping their privacy, so that other cars don't just read the information of my car. Like all this brought more innovation in the field. Then actually TrustPoint got acquired by a company called Scrypt. And Scrypt is a German company, was itself a startup in Germany, and became then acquired through other company and became part of Bosch, the Bosch group. And so that exposed me to automotive security, which was another part of the field. But I'm just gonna tell you that I will, when I tell you later, I'm still in all those transitions and all the things I get exposed to, I'm still mostly working closely to the algorithms layer, where I'm implementing things at the low level and very, very close to those small devices. So, and I'll give you an overview a bit about what does it mean automotive security, because that's also like an emerging field that's so huge. And at least in this diagram, you could see there is security at different levels. There is the security at the level of the ECU itself, the electronic control unit, which, for example, if that control unit is controlling the brakes, it needs to be it needs to know that the information that it came from the gateway or from the head unit to actually brake is true information. And so there is the security of each ECU, how it stores the information and how it stores the keys itself. And then there is the security between the different ECUs connected and the head unit of the vehicle. And then there is also the security between the vehicle and the cloud, or whatever is collecting, like, yeah, the cloud, however it's implemented or architected to collect the information from the vehicle. All this actually came more into spotlight after the Jeep attack. I don't know if you've seen it in the news, but that was back in 2015, where there were two clever attackers, like they were ethical hackers. They were proving that they could do that, could remotely mount an attack on a Jeep and go through the infotainment unit, which is entertainment and info unit in the car, and go from it to control things like the brakes and the steering and the dashboard functions and the transmission. So they actually stopped the car on the highway, but like the reporter who was there knew that they were going to do that, so he could steer safely. They ran the windshield wiper washer on its own, so couldn't see anything. And they also drove, like in one off-road, they showed him that they could drive the car to the ditch. And all this also like brought into spotlight and made all the OEMs and automotive rush that they have to do something so that like you separate the entertainment from the other units, and everything inside all the messages need to be authenticated. You cannot like just send any message and say, do something now with the steering wheel or do something now with the brakes. So that has been where I've worked so far, and what was my exposure into the different parts. But as I'm telling you, like most of this has just been in the blocks of algorithms. That's where most of my expertise has been. So so I would be like working more into designing the algorithms that would run into those environments, and also sometimes in designing the protocols, part of the protocols that were needed in some of the IoT field. AWS is where I work now, and this is the diagram I borrowed from this link from Amazon, from AWS websites and documentation, and I'm just borrowed it to show you that like the things that happen in the cloud, like the data is one piece, but the things that happen in the cloud and the components that you can put together to handle the data, they are massive. So AWS itself has about over 200 key, like security and compliance and key services to handle the data. And so for something like an IoT application, you could put many blocks together and to be able to collect the data securely and then process it securely and get the analytics you want from it, and also do now machine learning on the data and store it and trust it would be encrypted, and all those components. But I find myself fortunate that I work in such place, because it felt to me like I started in June, and it still feels to me that it's like you're in a big toy store and you can just bring any toys down from the shelf and play with them, and then you can return them back, no harm done, but like you can experiment. But actually, this is not just for someone who works in a cloud company like AWS, but the cloud itself and all the techniques that it brought, and the speed with which it's maturing and bringing in new services, made that available to all developers to just experiment with things and spin them quickly. And even if you need servers, you need instances, machines, you need anything, you just put them together. And even if you don't want them, you can like dismantle them and even close the account if you don't want. And all what you would have paid like is very little money, but that made it available for many developers to innovate. So after giving you an overview, so why like that past section was titled different but similar, because I was telling you, just giving you a taste of where I've been. And where I've been, as I'm saying, yeah, I didn't tell you that in AWS, I'm still working in the cryptographic library, which also like even there is much to be done, experimenting on a new environment. And even to that library, there are things to be continually added and looked at and innovated. But so I'm saying that there were different paths. I looked at different applications, but I was similarly working close to the lower layer. But imagine then if you want to work in any of the other layers, like you could be working at the hardware level, which is implementing now crypto instructions, or you could be working on higher level protocols, or you could be working in like endless applications that use those concepts. So that brings me to the next section. There is actually a big gap to be filled, and only the gap is getting wider. So this was an article that came last year in October in CBC, and it was interviewing with some females in the field, and it showcased Lisa Kearney from Vancouver. And she was talking about the field that she started in cybersecurity 24 years ago, and how there were very few women. And she also felt the pressure of being a woman in tech and a woman in cybersecurity, and the other things that could come with it, whether it's harassment or bypassing or taking credit for your work. And she decided herself that she's gonna do like a women's cybersecurity society to help women get into that field and stay in it. Because actually, like as you can see in this title, that the companies must recruit more women because the field is so wide, and there isn't enough workforce or enough skilled people. And this has been also come in other news, that the cybersecurity field will always need professionals, and there will so far seems like always not be enough. The article also mentioned a program in Sheridan College here in Ontario, and had an interview with Alana from that, who was a graduate from that program, and who works now in a company called, I think, Compass Security. Yeah, and she was saying, yeah, it was a bit of a bro culture to penetrate the program, but she also was like, she didn't know that she would end up in this field. But as it says here, until a family member told her she would never be out of work. And she would, and Lisa said she saw starting salaries in like 60s and 70s, and even saw starting salaries in the hundreds of Ks for that field. But one thing Elena said that I liked, actually, she said, but I want to be recognized for my skills and not just my gender. So she said that when I was applying for co-op, I was told, yeah, you won't have a problem finding a job because you're a woman. But she said this was a bit demotivating. And I'll come to that in the lessons learned. There was a video as part of this article. I'll see if there is time at the end. I could show it to you, but if not, I will. You could go to it and see it. It's a 2-minute video, an interview with both Lisa and Alana. But I wanted to show you this one, and I hope it plays okay. If not, just please, when you're Adele, let me know if it's not playing okay. And this one was from Cybercrime magazine, and it was came out in November 2019. It was saying that the statistics are not that great, but they are not as low as they have been before for that field, for women in that field. So it's not like the 13% sometimes people say. It's now around 20%, but we want to move beyond that. So I'll show you this one.
Well, it looks like the world I believe in, where there is no difference.
Cybersecurity has a compelling factor, a human factor. It's to protect, to secure, to nurture.
Don't let anybody tell you you can't do it. Don't let anyone tell you you need a certain background to be successful.
The message, without even me saying it, is that look at me, I've done it, you can also do it. And I don't mean by that that every girl needs to become a coder or an engineer or a scientist. No, but they have to see it as a possibility.
As I've seen a lot of the really great talent we have coming in as interns, I will say I think I had an expectation that things had changed more, and they've helped educate me that we'd still have work to do, right? And that's why I also think it's very important to have role models. Even within my organization, 50% of my direct staff are female and 36% of my overall team is female. There's still more work to do.
I'm actually proud to say that GE has 3 of its top most senior cybersecurity positions filled by women today.
Follow your dreams is, just like I said, when I was 11 years old, I actually toured the J. Edgar Hoover building right here that we're sitting in. And I thought from that moment forward, I want to be an FBI agent. I didn't stop to think at the time I'd never seen a female FBI agent, and I didn't stop to think certainly that there were no females at that time in charge of field offices or in charge of divisions. That didn't stop me. I just thought that sounded like a really cool career, and I wanted to be a part of it.
It's really important for women to bootstrap each other, but I've got to give credit to the men early in my career who saw something in me, and I in turn want to pay that forward by giving people who don't necessarily fit the mold a chance to succeed.
I kind of want to build the products by an organization that looks like the people who are using them. People will go almost anywhere they're invited, but they stay where they belong.
People from different linguistic or cultural backgrounds are always going to bring something different to the table.
Girls tell us that they're interested in cybersecurity because they care about their personal safety, they care about protecting their digital life, but they also protect their community. And they are so focused on protecting our nation from those that would do us harm.
This is an area you can do most any job within this field.
There is an socioeconomic barrier to people entering this field.
Cybersecurity is probably the coolest thing I have ever done in my life.
So I did like many of the things that were said by those ladies. I'll come to some of them and the lessons learned. But I just wanted to give you an example of some women I know myself in the field, and some examples that just give you an idea about what they do that may not be exactly what you would think it is. So Atefeh Mashetan, I did take a course with her when we were doing our master's. It was about network security. And then she finished her PhD as well. She did go to industry. She worked in banks. And then, as it said in this article from Ryerson University, when she received, she was nominated as one of the top women in cybersecurity in July of this year. Actually, this article is very nice. You can go and read about the rest of the women there. This one, they're all inspirationals. So she observed the talent gap in the cybersecurity workforce. So she went back to academia and founded the Cybersecurity Research Lab. And she said, like, it was because I had this industry experience, I found that there aren't enough programs that give people this experience in university. And it would, if someone has both the the study and the industry experience it's a treasure, but I couldn't find programs doing that, so she started one. Coode is also someone I met, and I've heard of other people who met her speaking at their kids' schools. She's a privacy advocate, but she made out of it also a career because she's a data and privacy expert. She would be the one who reads, like when you get a new app or you're signing up to something, and you would have all the legal information coming up about what you're signing up to. She would read that and analyze it and help companies and help people understand what that means, what they're signing up for, and help educated corporates and individuals and in speaking engagements and in contracts too, as you can see from her LinkedIn, about their data privacy and the regulations and the European regulations, the GDPR that came out I think 2 years ago. So she started her own company. It's called Binary Tattoo, based on that. So I move now to lessons learned in one slide, but I'll spend some time telling you about like what are the things I learned, and I found them articulated well when I take them from the Amazon leadership principles. You can find those principles online. There are 14 principles. I chose 4 here that I'll talk about, but they resonated with me because they were already some lessons that I have learned and continue to learn. So the first one, they are not in a certain order. Actually, the first one in certain order for Amazon is customer obsession, and AWS as well, because like they focus most on the customer. But this is like, I'm not putting customer obsession here, but this is one of them. Learn and be curious. So one of my criteria in choosing where I'm gonna work was like whether I'm gonna continue to learn, whether I'm gonna continue to be engaged and interested. Of course, not every moment of the day is like that at work, whether you're in academia or in industry or you're staying at home. Like not every moment is going to be a moment of learning and of engagement. But in general, you should be able to feel that like as months go, you're contributing to new things, you're learning new things. So ask questions. So to be able to learn and you always ask questions. And I'm always like, since I was young, I was never afraid to ask questions. Even sometimes when those questions like seemed embarrassing because like I would look like I don't understand or not so clever. And that sometimes happened, but that was fine with me because like I just want an answer and I'm not going to be satisfied with half answers. And if you don't have the answer, then please direct me to someone who does. I remember that during my research, I came to some point, like my research focused at the beginning on very mathematical properties of numbers, and I wasn't like, it wasn't something I was prepared for. And then I needed some computer science construct. You may know it. I think it was the automaton, and I didn't know some things about it. So I went to a professor in computer science, and I set an appointment with him and went and asked. And of course, like some of the things that were obvious to him or obvious to someone in computer science wasn't to me, but I didn't give up. I just had to understand it. If someone else could understand it, then I could as well. I remember also that in my job, when we got acquired by Ascript, there was a new product that I had to be able to present it to customers. But I said, I need to be able to work it to present it to customers, not just know some slides. And there was the offer to go to Germany and train on it. So I did, but there wasn't like a rigorous onboarding plan. So I kind of like was given a space, given someone to ask questions, to ask them questions. And so for the 2 weeks I spent there, I just was like constantly asking like and trying to figure like who to meet, who to get information from. And to tell you the truth, like the one who was mostly helpful and had gathered a lot of information, because I found that with some colleagues that sometimes they were just focused on their area. They didn't know like much outside it, but it was a female test engineer who was happened to be in the same office where I was. And she had like, I don't know, she was testing, but she did read like the architecture document, and she could answer my questions very well. She actually continued to be a Scrum Master and like take more responsibility. And also, like I'll say here that I did tell you in my story that I didn't set out to get a PhD, but I found that a degree does help in this field, because it does give you a credit when you're talking about something, or like even in the acquisitions that happened, because I've been through two. One of the things that would be put on the company, like how many PhDs do you have? Because not that it means that they are smarter than other people, and other people, if they wouldn't be smart enough if they do, but it just says that this person spent some time looking at a problem and getting some new results out of it, or some new discoveries. And so they can do that in other fields too. They are not afraid to learn. They are not afraid to dive deep. And that's my next principle, and also lesson learned. So dive deep and stay connected to details. Actually, this principle in Amazon says no task is beneath you. So like nothing is too small to look at, and nothing is too big also to scare you away. But what I've learned is that dive deep to just get the details that you need, and not to get all the details in the field. Of course, like as the field grows bigger and as you dive deeper, you would find that there are so many things you could learn, but it's good to focus on what you need, the details that you actually need to do your current research or your current job, because whatever you research outside that, if you don't use it, you may lose it, and you may end up coming back to it, but you do the research again. So it's good to be aware that there are other things, but just focus on what you're diving deep for. And this focus, I actually learned, I could say I learned it more from my male colleagues. And I say my male colleagues because most of my colleagues were male anyway. But that bias for action, I found that I do acknowledge that we have different ways of thinking. So females, as you read in that article, are multitaskers. They also think in different directions, and things connect with them very quickly. The brains are different. And I read that in books who were studying that. And so they can connect many things very quickly. And I found that very helpful when we were like discussing things with customers. I could like see different questions that could arise, different needs, different things that would come down the road. Did we actually make account for those dates? Did we make account for those requirements? But what I learned from my male colleagues is the focus on like one thing and finishing it, because it's not helpful also when connecting different things to be scattered. And then I found that sometimes I fell in the analysis paralysis. So in my new job now, I'm trying to say, okay, back in the day to learn programming, when I started, and like my first exposure from C is get this book and read the C book. Now, if you need to do anything, everything is on Stack Overflow, and people are volunteering their information on forums and everything. So like when I need to do a job, I could just try to understand what I need, get it quickly, and continue and move on. And if I need to go deeper, if it's not needed for this now, let me finish it now, and then I come back to it, or I'll make it like as a research afternoon where I'll research this. Oh, sorry, I'm gonna say something about multitasking. So I found also, especially when working from home, multitasking is possible with some tasks, but I found that only the things that I give my full attention to are the things that I learn the best. So if there is a meeting and or a talk I'm attending, if I'm doing other things that also require parts of my brain, even if small decisions about something like whether to write this in email or something, then I do both badly. But if I really want to get something done, I need to give it my full attention. And the last one I borrowed was earn trust. So I can tell you, like, and maybe you've noticed through my journey that I think I can say all of my jobs were through networking. So as I told you, the first one was from BlackBerry, the head of security. Then he recommended me to people who I worked with in Cybercrime. One of them has been my manager through different companies for about 13 years. And some of those were interrupted, but like we've kept this relationship. And because the people, when they know someone that they like to work with, wherever they go, they try to get, like, if they can get more people in the team, they get the people they like to work with. So build long-lasting relationships. That's saying, like, yeah, the rest of my jobs also were through people I've known through previous jobs. It doesn't mean that I passed the interview or the preparation for it or the stress of it. No, that's not the case. But at least it means that it opens a door, because people have trusted that you've done good work and that you're someone that is good to work with, then they would bring you along. I'd like to stress that let your good work speak for you. Like when you do a good job, and when you're a person that's easy to deal with, then your work and you will speak for you. People would know that even if, like for example, for me, I raised the family all through my work. And actually many people I reported to, my male managers, all were family people, and they had also like demands on their time. So they know that, but that eventually when you get to your task, you will do it, and you will do it well, and you will do it carefully, well tested, well delivered, and well written. Actually, oh yeah, about the writing, I'll go back to learn and be curious. Take any opportunity you can to learn how to write well, because this is very important. Whether communicating with your peers or in emails, especially when we're working from home, or writing documentation for a product, or even documenting code, that's all very important. And so earning trust is also to be honest about what you can do and what you cannot do, or what you need time to learn, like because when you need time, everyone needs time to learn something new. And also when there is a mistake that you have done most of the time unintentionally, it's good to admit that, yeah, this was a mistake, but like if I need help to fix it, I'll ask for help to fix it, or I know how to fix it. So those are all things that earn trust and that make people look for you to work with you. So I think there could be more lessons, and we could dive deeper in the leadership principles, but I think I've already taken time, and I hope you still have time for the Q&A. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Nevine. This is Adele Newton, the Executive Director of CS CAN InfoCAN, and it's my pleasure to thank Nevine for her talk. I've had the pleasure of working with Nevine on a number of projects over the years, and so it's really wonderful to have you speak to this audience. I especially liked your lessons learned, and I think that those apply to all of us, especially the lesson about being curious, about not being afraid to ask questions, to earn people's trust, and to maintain that network. Those are all important things. And also that no job is too small for you. We all learn from everything that we do. And speaking of learning and questions, we do have a couple that have come through. One is, are there security standards that exist?
Yeah, that question actually I think is very vast. There are so many security standards that exist because I don't know if you're asking about a particular standard, but the short answer is yes, there are many. But usually you get exposed to the one that you need to work with. So if you're working with data privacy, you will get, for example, like AWS has been compliant with many standards, and some of them are for data privacy in the cloud or security in the cloud. There are also the FIPS standards for the crypto modules, whether they are software or hardware. Those have been there for a while. There are European standards also sometimes that mirror the American standards. So yes, there are
lots of standards. Yes, yeah. Lots of standards. Do you test the security and privacy solutions using formal methods or by testing? How do you do those?
Oh, that's a very good question. Actually, I haven't been exposed to formal methods much until I worked at AWS. So it's a field, I think that's, I don't know how long it's been around, but I think it has been, formal verification of hardware has been there, and then now it's going to software because you can also not test all the use cases of software. But like, I'll try to make this answer concise as well. In software in general, you have like methods you need to follow. You're testing each function with unit tests. You're testing across layers with integration. You're testing the application as the customer would use it, most of the use cases. And then there are some corner cases you can do in testing and some you can do in formal verification. So I think there are emerging companies and research in that field for how to do it for crypto as well.
Thank you. What would you say is probably the greatest risk at an average or typical company, security risk?
I think there is always a risk when you're handling personally identifiable information. So if you have information of customers, if you have information of the employees as well. So whenever, like, I think the first attention to put is what you're doing with that information and how it's flowing and what is touching and what is touching it. And so I think if you try to invent yourself the ways that you're going to protect this information, you're going to probably fall in the same pitfalls that caused leaks. So I think it's good to always follow the trodden path of like what security best practices are there around handling the data.
And we've seen some of those come through for sure over the years.
Yeah. And many of them are not a problem with the crypto or security itself, but sometimes it's the access control or the configurations of the things that touch the data. So it's that's why it's like if it's a checklist, it's a multiple page checklist to look at, and so you need to and many people have learned from their mistakes, so it's good to follow what they learned.
Now I know from working with you and with other companies and researchers that most people, most financial and most companies are aware of the security risks. Is that becoming more and more an issue for companies, that they understand that there are security risks?
I think it's becoming more because those companies, when they sell something, the consumers, whether it's individual consumers or other companies, are more aware to ask, like, what are you doing with this data? What are you doing? Like, can you show us your security processes and around it and how you're protecting it? And so I think it's not something that they can overlook anymore, because people are now aware of like what can happen if the data is not protected.
Which is why there's that gap in jobs, correct?
Yeah. Because also it needs to be protected at so many levels. That's why I was saying, like, AWS itself as a cloud has more than 200 services. Like they are used in certain ways, put together in certain ways for certain, depending on the application. And so, yeah, the field is massive.
Do you think, here's is another question, do you believe 100% security is obtainable?
It's a good question. I don't know if anything 100% is obtainable. So even like, even in the cloud, there are things that are called service level agreements, SLA, which is like how reliable or how uptime. So for example, an SLA of 99.99%, that means that your service may be down 4 minutes in a month or something like that. So but I know that the security field is different, but we usually protect as many attacks as we know are out there, but that doesn't prevent more attacks to come out. So and even sometimes if your application is not susceptible to certain attacks, you don't need to protect in a certain way. So 100%, like, I don't know, that's it's not reasonable to say 100%, but it could be reasonable to say you're protecting against those particular attacks that could happen against your application.
So some questions about certification. What certification would you advise to take in cybersecurity? And is it advisable to keep up with those certifications?
I tell you, to be honest, I haven't looked exactly like at the field, because I didn't come across needing to take another certification after like I obtained my degree. So, but I've seen colleagues who take some of the Cisco certifications, or I know that AWS has a lot of certifications for working with the cloud. I believe that some of them would be focused on security. I think that the cloud itself is, I'm not saying particularly AWS, but the cloud in general is a big field, and anything that would teach you how to play with it and how to play safely with it, I think it would be good. But if we want to follow up, I could try to ask if other people would know more about what certification to take.
Well, and certainly from my experience, it's always advisable to keep up with certifications, because that's almost always a question that will come up. And speaking of jobs, for those applying to computer security jobs, do you have any advice of things that we can do to stand out from other applicants? I know you said having some experience, so having had a co-op job was useful to you for sure.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I was actually trying to go back to my experience hiring co-op students and colleagues. I think if you're applying to a junior position in a company that has to do with security, they may not require you to know much about security beforehand. Of course, it would show as an asset if you've done something some reading or some programming where you've used certain classes or structures that already deal with authentication or with communication, or if you've used TLS or things like that, if you know the lingo of the things related to certification, to security, like certificates and digital signatures and all those things, that would be a good asset, because that means you're not going to be starting from like this is completely unknown to you. But if you're applying to like further jobs for example, like a scientist job or something that's more research, yes, you would need to know more and at a deeper level. But that would usually require like taking courses that would expose you to that level.
Or having, as you did, a master's or an advanced degree, a master's or a PhD. We have run out of time, but I do want to read something that came through in the comments. Thank you so much for this wonderful webinar. Hearing Nevine's experiences and lessons learned has been invaluable. So I'm going to leave it with that. And thank you so much for taking the time, Nevine, to be with us today, and for encouraging the audience to look at this field as a place for a career, and your experiences and lessons learned. And I'm going to pass it along to Wendy Polly, who's going to close us out. Thanks, Nevine.
Thank you, Del.
Okay, let me just, Nevine, I'm going to have you stop sharing your screen.
Sure.
Thank you. Okay. Let me just go to here. I'll just take a second more of your time. And okay, you should be seeing my slides with the chat up there. Okay, so I just have the pleasure of closing the conference. And let me get my slides going here. And I'd like to get in a shameless plug for a program that we're going to be running at Queen's. And this is sponsored by Google, an Explore CS research grant that we got to run some programs on cybersecurity. So we're running a free mini course for women coming in January 2021. We haven't quite set the dates yet, but we'll be sending out email about this. It's going to be a short mini course intended for people who don't really know very much about cybersecurity, but would like to learn something about cybersecurity. Focused on women because there are a lack of women in this field. So we'd like to encourage more women to get into the field. There'll be prizes and opportunities for internships. There is a cybersecurity research program at Queen's, and we're going to reserve at least one spot for an internship for somebody from this program. So watch for details about that. It's sponsored by Google and it's run by Queen's and RMC. I'd like to thank our sponsors once again. Without our sponsors, CAN-CWiC cannot happen. So we really appreciate their support for the conference and for running the Q&A sessions that they've been running the last couple of days. I hear that they've been going quite well, and I hope you got lots out of those. And speaking of the career fair sessions, we have 2 left. IBM's running a session right now from 1 to 3. The Q&A session link is on the website, the CAN-CWiC website. You should be able to just click on it and join. And D2L has a session starting right now as well at 2 o'clock, running till 3 o'clock, and the link is also on the page. I'd like to thank you for attending. This has been great. I hope you guys learned a lot from the sessions that we had. And I hope you join us again next year when hopefully we're in person for an event. Enjoy the rest of your day, everybody. Thank you for coming.